My life had always looked perfect from the outside. I had a loving husband, a beautiful home nestled in a quiet suburb, and a sister who was more like a soulmate than a sibling. We shared everything: secrets, memories, laughter, and never imagined anything could come between us. My husband, Daniel, was the kind of man every woman dreams of: kind, thoughtful, dependable. He never made grand romantic gestures, but he had a quiet way of making me feel cherished. He supported my dreams, respected my independence, and never hesitated to let me take the lead in our relationship. Then there was my sister, Lila, vibrant, fearless, and utterly magnetic. She had a personality that filled any room she walked into. Where I was calm and steady, Lila was bold and spontaneous. She'd always drawn people to her like moths to a flame. I never envied her. Instead, I admired her light and felt proud to be her quieter counterpart. Daniel and Lila got along well. In fact, they got along so easily that it became a joke between us. I'd often laugh and say they had more in common than Daniel and I did. It never struck me as odd because I trusted them both. Their connection felt like an extension of my love for each of them. Our trio became almost inseparable. Lila would join us for dinners, spontaneous movie nights, even weekend getaways. I believed it only strengthened the bond between the people I loved the most. But sometimes I noticed Daniel pulling away, retreating into himself during conversations, his eyes distant when Lila spoke. I'd catch him watching her with a quiet intensity that I didn't quite understand. I brushed it off. Lila had always been the star. She drew attention without meaning to. Why should it be different now? One evening, Lila suggested she needed a break from her fast-paced life in the city. She wanted to stay with us for a few days, maybe even join us on a weekend trip we had planned to a lakeside cabin. The idea thrilled me. I loved having her around. It felt like a return to simpler times when we were younger and inseparable. Daniel's reaction was unexpected. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice low and unreadable. "Of course," I replied, brushing off his hesitation. "It'll be fun. Just like old times." He nodded, but his reluctance lingered. I chalked it up to his introverted nature. He'd come around. After all, who wouldn't want a weekend by the lake with loved ones? Looking back, I see now how blind I was. That weekend began like any other. Lila brought her usual charm and energy, brightening every corner of the cabin. Daniel, however, seemed unusually quiet. I tried to make excuses for him. Work stress, maybe, or just exhaustion. But there was something different in the air. Conversations felt off, like everyone was performing instead of just being. Daniel barely looked at me. And when he did speak, it was as though his words were running on autopilot. Lila, on the other hand, seemed more attuned to him than ever, laughing at his dry humor, drawing him out when he tried to disappear into the background. I told myself they were just being kind, that they were making an effort to be close for my sake. But something deep inside me began to stir, an unease I couldn't name. That night, after dinner and a few glasses of wine, Lila suggested a game, something silly to end the day with laughter. Daniel hesitated but eventually joined in. His laugh was brittle, like it had forgotten how to be real. As the game unfolded, I noticed the small glances between them, too quick to seem deliberate, but too weighted to ignore. My stomach twisted, but I swallowed the doubt. This was Lila and Daniel, the two people I trusted more than anyone else. The next day we went on a hike. I lingered behind to take photos of the wildflowers and trees. Ahead of me, Daniel and Lila walked side by side, lost in conversation. I watched the way their bodies leaned slightly toward each other, their steps in rhythm, and felt that sharp pang again. They seemed too in sync, too connected. I hated myself for doubting them. That night, Daniel stayed up reading while I got ready for bed. Lila claimed she needed to make a call and stepped outside. I didn't think much of it, until I heard their voices. Intimate, unmistakably close. I stood by the door, not breathing. I couldn't make out the words, only the tone. And that tone said everything. Still I did nothing. I told myself I was imagining things. Had to be. Because the alternative was unthinkable. When we returned home, something had changed. I could feel it in the air, in the way Daniel barely looked me in the eye, in how Lila's once frequent visits started feeling calculated. Daniel grew distant. His phone was always with him. Always silent. Lila became a shadow, sometimes too present, sometimes completely absent. When she did visit, there was a strange awkwardness in the air, like a joke no one dared to say aloud. One evening I found Daniel's laptop open on the counter. It wasn't like me to pry, but my hand moved before I could stop it. There, buried in his inbox, were the emails. Dozens of them. Weeks' worth. Between Daniel and Lila. They weren't explicit, but the intimacy in their words was undeniable. Shared memories from the cabin. Lingering thoughts. Guilt-ridden confessions. Acknowledgments of feelings neither could deny. My heart stopped. My breath vanished. When Daniel walked in moments later, I held up the screen. He looked at it, then at me. And didn't say a word. "What is this?" he asked, voice shaking. "When did it start?" He sat down heavily, running a hand through his hair. "It wasn't supposed to happen." His words only deepened the pain. I wanted to scream, to cry, to undo time. As if on cue, Lila arrived. I don't know if they had planned it. Maybe fate just decided to twist the knife. She stepped into the room, eyes wide, face pale. "Please," she whispered. "I didn't mean to hurt you." But all I could see was betrayal, etched into the faces of the two people I loved most. "How could you?" I asked, looking between them. "You were my sister. And you were my husband. How could you do this to me?" Lila cried. Daniel looked broken. But I felt nothing but a vast, numbing ache. The confrontation didn't end with answers. Only silence. And then they both left. I sat there, alone in our kitchen, surrounded by the ruins of a life I thought was unshakable. In the days that followed, I shut them out. Daniel texted, called, even came by once, begging for a chance to explain. Lila sent messages too, long and pleading. I couldn't respond. I wasn't ready. I journaled, sometimes until dawn. I wrote everything. Every memory, every moment I now saw in a new, painful light. I reached out to my best friend, Isla, who reminded me with gentle firmness that my worth wasn't defined by anyone's betrayal. Eventually I agreed to meet Daniel. His apologies were raw. He talked about guilt, regret, and how he never wanted to hurt me. He said he felt lost, drawn to Lila's energy in a moment of weakness. That it wasn't love. That it was confusion. But trust, once broken, is like shattered glass. You might gather the pieces, but you can never restore it to what it was. Lila reached out again. This time I agreed to meet her. She cried the moment she saw me. She said she'd hated herself for what she'd done, that it was a moment of madness that spiraled into something neither of them understood. I told her I might forgive her one day. But that didn't mean I could ever let her back in. Not the way it used to be. And so I made a choice. I left Daniel. Not out of revenge. But because staying would have meant abandoning myself. And I'd already lost too much. It wasn't easy. The nights were long and full of memories. But I started healing. I found strength in solitude. I traveled, took up painting, reconnected with people I'd neglected. I found pieces of myself I hadn't known were missing. In time the ache dulled. The memories faded from sharp pain to distant echoes. And I learned that survival isn't about forgetting what hurt you. It's about remembering who you are beneath the wounds.